Hello, welcome to session number 4 of the Mayamiko natural dyeing course, and this session is all about mordanting with alum, and it's part 1 of our 2-part series at looking at how to fix the colour to the fabric so that when we wash it, when it's out in the sunshine, it doesn't disappear but is really strong and colour fast. So if we come back to our process, last session we looked at cutting, weighing and washing the fabric, and now your fabric has been washed and it's ready to go into the next stage. So we're ready to put it into the mordant. And like I mentioned, this session we're going to focus on using alum as the mordant, which will become much clearer shortly. So each piece of our fabric, as we've seen before, is made up of 3 dyeing layers. The final colour, which is the bright colour, the light yellow brown fixer dye, and our no colour fixer dye mordant. And so today we're going to be focusing on this first layer. So this is a really important layer, and if the word mordant is new and a bit strange, don't worry. It actually is a very simple meaning, and it just means an ingredient that combines with a dye to fix a colour to the fabric. So I like to think of it as our fixer dye. And some of the key points around mordanting are that mordants are often invisible or give a very light colour to the fabric. So we need to stay organised and on top of what we're doing, because it's sometimes very difficult to tell the difference between fabric which hasn't been mordanted and fabric which has been mordanted. So that's when our labelling comes into real strength. So many different ingredients can be used as mordants, but not all of them are safe and many are toxic. For example, traditionally, copper, tin and chrome, really heavy metals, have been used, but these have health hazards, so we're not going to be using these. Mordants can also be used in different ways to create patterns and print to the fabric. For example, they can be used during block printing and batik because mordants change the colour of the dye. Often they'll sometimes strengthen the colour, or they'll darken the colour, or they'll brighten the colour. There's lots of variation that mordants can bring to create really beautiful effects, which are an exciting experiment which we can try at some point. So the safest mordants to use are alum, iron and tannin, and we'll be using all 3 of these mordants. We'll also experiment with using soya as a mordant as well. That's a very different type of mordant, but all of them can be used, and it's about seeing which works best in Malawi for Mayamiko. So like I mentioned, mordants do influence the final colour, and so in some ways they're one of the most important steps or stages in the natural dyeing process, because it's what bonds the colour to the fabric. It fixes the colour to the fabric, and so this video is really important. This part of the process is really important to understand, and hopefully you will by the end of this session. So let me introduce alum to you, because when I started natural dyeing I had no idea what this substance was, and so it may also be a very new concept to you. But actually in Sri Lanka, alum is used a lot for herbal medicinal purposes. So for instance, when men go to the hairdressers or to get their beard shaved, alum is often rubbed onto the skin afterwards to help soothe the skin. So it has medicinal purposes which are traditionally used. But there are 2 types of alum. There's potassium alum sulfate and alum acetate. And both of these can be used as mordants, and both of them give different results. But hopefully we're going to be using potassium alum sulfate if it's available in Malawi. Potassium alum sulfate is usually cheaper and more widely available, and it's basically a mineral which is extracted from a rock. So alum helps with colour and wash fastness, and it is the most common mordant used for natural dyeing. It comes in these two forms, so you can see the picture of the rock crystal and then the picture of the powder. And so it might come in either way in Malawi. In Sri Lanka, we purchase it as the rock crystal. So it's best to wear gloves when handling alum and a mask if using it in powder form, because sometimes, depending on each person, it can sometimes cause skin irritation. So it's best to use gloves and a mask just to be safe. So just like we had to do with figuring out the weight of the fabric, we also have to figure out how much alum we need. And that's really key and goes back to last session when we weighed our dry fabric, because we need that weight for this part of the process as well. So again, we've got our 3 different plants: pomegranate skins, onion skins, and avocado stones. And we've got the same weights. We've got 200 grams for pomegranate skins, 150 for onion, and 220 for avocado, just to give you some variety. But these are all example weights. And then we're going to be using 20% of alum to the fabric weight. So the total alum weight that we need for the 200 gram pomegranate skins is 40 grams of alum. And again, quite a simple calculation, and we can use all this information and pull it together once we've figured out the plant weights that we need for Mayamiko. We can pull together a really concise table and recipe which is really easy to follow. But the key point here is to remember 20% of alum to the weight of the fabric, and you'll be just fine. And so once we've worked out the weight of the alum, now we need to weigh the alum to make sure that we get it accurate. And you can see Mina, she uses a hammer to break up the rock crystal, so just be careful. And once she's done that, she'll have lots of different pieces, and she goes ahead and weighs those on the scales to make sure that she's got the right amount for what she needs for the weight of the fabric. Another key point is to make sure that all of the scales are often that you clean the scales, because you might be weighing fabric, or you might be weighing alum, or you might be weighing plants. And so, like Mina's done here, just putting a layer or a plastic bag to collect the alum is really useful and keeps everything clean as we go. So once we've got our weighed alum, we can then add it to a big pot of boiling water and we can dissolve it. And once it's dissolved, this should only take around 20 to 30 minutes once all the rock crystal is dissolved. And if you're using a powder, then again you can follow this process, but it will be much quicker. You can then take it to the dye bucket. So we're going to add the alum to the dye bucket. This is actually our biggest bucket that we use. We need to make sure that the fabric can move around freely, and we don't need to use a sieve and a cloth. So for the rest of the process, when we're extracting the plants, we'll collect all the debris. But because the alum has just dissolved into the water, we can just tip that directly into the bucket and then add extra cool water, so it can be cold, until all the fabric is covered and it's got space to move around. We tend to use a maximum of around 6 meters in each of our buckets. But once you've got your buckets, we can see, what is a good amount of fabric for each bucket. So 6 meters tends to be around 3 lengths of fabric. So once we've added the fabric, we need to stir it pretty often so that all of the fabric is coated in the alum and that it's absorbed. Because this is a really key stage, because if any of the fabric is sticking out of the bucket, that fabric is going to give a different colour to the fabric which is in the bucket, because it won't have the same amount of mordant on it. So once we've added the fabric and stirred it, we need to leave it for a minimum of 3 hours. But ideally, it's best to leave it for 12 hours or overnight until the next day. The longer it can sit there and stew, usually the darker the colour. And so overnight is a good guideline. So now I've gone through this whole process of fixing the mordant and our fabric is in our bucket. Next session, we're going to take it on to look at part 2 of our fixing the colour and look at tannin, which is our light yellow brown fixer dye. And the mordant and the tannin are going to bond together to give us a really good base to produce our final layer, which is the bright colour. So thanks so much for this session, and hope that was clear. And yeah, look forward to session number 5. Bye.